My grandmother left me a key in their will. I don't know what it opens. The lawyer's voice droned on, but all I could focus on was the snickering coming from the other side of the mahogany table. My Aunt Patricia had just inherited Grandma Rose's house, the Victorian I'd spent every summer in since I was 6. Uncle Dennis got the investment portfolio worth $340,000. Cousin Jennifer? The jewelry collection, including Grandma's wedding ring that I'd always assumed would be mine. And to Maya Catherine Summers, Mr. Hensley cleared his throat, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Rose Eleanor Blackwood leaves one antique key and the following note. The room fell silent. Even Patricia stopped filing her acrylic nails. My hand shook as Mr. Hensley slid a small velvet pouch across the polished wood. Inside was a tarnished brass key, ornate and old-fashioned, with intricate scrollwork along the head. The note was written in Grandma's spidery handwriting on cream stationery that smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. Asterisk, my dearest Maya, this key is for when you need it most. Remember, the strongest foundations are built on the deepest roots. Look where our story began. All my love, Grandma Rose. Asterisk. The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds before Patricia exploded into laughter. Are you kidding me? A rusty old key? She clutched her stomach, her blonde highlights catching the afternoon light streaming through the law office windows. Rose always said Maya was her favorite, and this is what she gets? What's it even open, a diary? Dennis joined in, his belly jiggling under his expensive polo shirt. Maybe it's for a bike lock she had in 1952. Even Jennifer, who'd at least had the decency to cry during the reading, couldn't suppress a smirk. I mean, it's probably sentimental, right Maya? Like, symbolic or whatever? I stared down at the key, my vision blurring. 3 weeks ago, I'd been holding Grandma Rose's hand in her hospital bed, promising her I'd finish my psychology degree at Northwestern. Now I was holding a piece of metal while watching my relatives, people who'd visited her maybe twice a year, people who'd rolled their eyes when she told her stories about the old days, divide up everything that had made her home feel magical. There must be some mistake, I managed to whisper. Mr. Hensley shook his head solemnly. Mrs. Blackwood was very specific about her wishes. She updated this will just 6 months ago, and I can assure you she was of completely sound mind. Patricia was already calculating out loud. So the house is worth at least $180,000, and with Dennis's portfolio, plus the jewelry appraisal at $45,000. She trailed off, but I could see the dollar signs in her eyes. What about college? The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Grandma was helping with my tuition. I'm supposed to graduate in December. Dennis shrugged. Sounds like a you problem now, kiddo. Maybe that key opens the door to the financial aid office. More laughter. I carefully folded the note and slipped it back into the pouch with the key, my cheeks burning. 22 years old, and I felt like I was 6 again, listening to these same people whisper about how Grandma Rose spoiled me, how I was just a burden since my parents died. As we filed out of the office, Patricia called over her shoulder, "Don't feel bad, sweetie. I'm sure it opens something important. Like a really old jewelry box. You know, from the dollar store." I clutched the velvet pouch tighter and tried to remember how to breathe. The next 3 months felt like watching my life collapse in slow motion. By October, I'd moved out of my shared apartment near Northwestern when I couldn't make rent. Sarah and Jessica, my roommates, were understanding at first, until I missed 2 months in a row. I found a studio in Rogers Park for $800 a month, which ate up most of my income from my part-time job at the campus bookstore. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's TV through the bathroom, and something was definitely wrong with the heating, but it was what I could afford. I tried to stay enrolled, really tried. I met with my academic advisor, Dr. Martinez, in her cramped office that smelled like coffee and old textbooks. "Maya, I know this is difficult," she'd said, sliding a tissue box across her desk. "But you're so close. Just 1 more semester. Have you looked into emergency financial aid?" I had. I'd filled out 17 different applications, written essays about my circumstances until my fingers cramped. The responses were all variations of the same theme: "We're sorry, but funds are limited and unfortunately, you don't qualify, and my personal favorite, have you considered taking a gap year?" Meanwhile, my phone buzzed constantly with updates I didn't want. Patricia had posted Instagram photos of her inheritance makeover, new granite countertops in Grandma's kitchen, the wallpaper I'd helped pick out in 2019 stripped away and replaced with something she called modern farmhouse chic. Dennis bought a boat. An actual boat, which he'd named Rose's Revenge, like it was some kind of joke. Jennifer had gotten the jewelry appraised and promptly sold half of it to fund a trip to Europe. "It's what Grandma would have wanted," she'd told me when I ran into her at the grocery store in November. "For us to enjoy life, you know?" I'd been buying ramen noodles in bulk. She'd had a cart full of organic everything and wine that cost more than my monthly phone bill. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the way they'd started treating me like I didn't exist. No invitations to Thanksgiving. No calls asking how I was doing. It was like losing Grandma Rose had somehow made me invisible to the only family I had left. I dropped out officially on November 15th. The registrar's office was brutally efficient about it, a few signatures, a calculation of what I owed for the partial semester, and just like that, 4 years of work became incomplete. Dr. Martinez had fought for me, even helped me get a medical withdrawal so it wouldn't completely destroy my GPA, but it still felt like giving up. That night, I sat on my mattress on the floor of my studio apartment and pulled out the velvet pouch. I'd looked at the key so many times I'd memorized every curve of its ornate metalwork. The note was getting soft around the edges from handling. Asterisk, look where our story began. Asterisk. I'd tried everything I could think of. I'd gone back to the house where Grandma grew up. Patricia had given me exactly 10 minutes to look around before threatening to call the police. I'd searched through old photo albums at the library, looking for clues about places that might have been important to her. I'd even called the bank where she'd done business for 30 years, asking if she'd had a safety deposit box. Nothing. The key felt heavier in my palm than it should have, like it was made of something denser than brass. Sometimes I wondered if this was Grandma's way of teaching me some kind of lesson about resilience, about not depending on money for happiness. But honestly, I was too tired and too hungry to appreciate the lesson. December brought the kind of Chicago cold that felt personal, like winter had a grudge against me specifically. My studio apartment's heating situation went from questionable to basically decorative, and I'd started sleeping in 3 layers plus my winter coat. The electric bill for running a space heater was going to destroy me, but frostbite seemed worse than debt. I'd picked up a second job at Murphy's Diner, working the 5 a.m. shift that nobody else wanted. The pay was terrible, $12 an hour plus tips that barely covered my coffee habit, but it came with 1 meal per shift, which had become embarrassingly important to my survival strategy. My manager, Tony, was a 60-something former Marine who called everyone kid and had a soft spot for hard luck cases. "You're too smart for this place," he told me on a Tuesday morning as I refilled the industrial coffee makers. "College girl like you should be doing better things." I'd stopped correcting people when they assumed I was still in school. It hurt less to let them think I was just working part-time for extra money. The morning rush was brutal, construction workers wanting everything fast and hot, commuters grabbing coffee before catching the L. I was wiping down table 6 when I heard a familiar laugh that made my stomach clench. Jennifer and Patricia were sliding into booth 12, Jennifer's designer purse hitting the vinyl seat with the soft thud of expensive leather. They were dressed for shopping, the kind of casual outfit that cost more than my monthly groceries. I grabbed the coffee pot and prayed they wouldn't recognize me. My hair was pulled back in the mandatory bun, and the diner uniform wasn't exactly flattering, but we'd shared enough family dinners that I wasn't optimistic about staying invisible. "Maya?" Patricia's voice cut across the diner like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh my god, what are you doing here?" So much for flying under the radar. I plastered on what I hoped looked like a confident smile and approached their table. "Hi, Patricia." "Jennifer. Can I get you some coffee?" Jennifer was staring like I was a zoo exhibit. "Are you working here?" "Like, actually working here?" "Just picking up some extra hours," I lied, filling their cups even though my hands were shaking. The coffee pot suddenly weighed 50 pounds. Patricia exchanged a look with Jennifer, and I knew exactly what was coming. The pity party was about to begin. "Honey," Patricia said in that saccharine voice she used when she wanted to sound caring, "you know, if you just asked for help. I mean, we're family." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I'd called Patricia in September, when the financial aid office had delivered their final rejection. I'd swallowed every ounce of pride and explained my situation, asked if there was any way they could help with just 1 semester of tuition, $8,000. I'd offered to pay it back with interest, to sign any paperwork they wanted. Patricia had listened to my entire pitch before saying, "Well, Maya, Grandma Rose left you what she wanted you to have. Maybe this is her way of teaching you independence." Now she was sitting in my section, talking about family obligation while wearing a coat that cost more than I made in 2 months. "I'm doing fine," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Are you ready to order?" Jennifer ordered an egg white omelet with gluten-free toast. Patricia wanted Greek yogurt with fresh berries, $14 for breakfast that wouldn't fill up a toddler. They spent the entire meal talking about their Christmas plans, deliberately loud enough for me to hear while I served other tables. The ski lodge in Aspen is supposed to be incredible this year. "Did you see Dennis bought another boat?" Apparently one wasn't enough. When they finally left, Jennifer made a show of leaving a $20 tip on their $30 check. "For college," she whispered conspiratorially, like she was solving all my problems with her generosity. I stared at the 20 after they left, my reflection distorted in the diner's chrome napkin dispenser. 4 months ago, I'd been planning my senior thesis on cognitive behavioral therapy. Now I was grateful for pity tips from people who'd inherited my grandmother's legacy. That night, I pulled out the key again and held it up to the weak light from my desk lamp. The scrollwork seemed to shift in the shadows, forming patterns I'd never noticed before. Asterisk, look where our story began. Asterisk. What if I'd been thinking about this all wrong? I stared at those words until they blurred together. Where our story began, not where Grandma's story began, asterisk our asterisk story. Mine and hers. The realization hit me like a slap. I'd been thinking about Grandma's childhood, her house, her past. But our story, Maya and Rose's story, that started somewhere completely different. It started at Mercy General Hospital, 22 years ago, when my parents died in a car accident and Grandma Rose became my legal guardian. I grabbed my laptop, ignoring the way it took 3 tries to connect to my spotty Wi-Fi, and started searching. Mercy General Hospital Chicago patient records, hospital safety deposit boxes, medical facility storage. Most of the results were dead ends, but buried on page 4 of my Google search, I found something interesting, an article from the Chicago Tribune archives, dated 1987. The headline read, "Local hospitals offer safe storage for patient valuables during extended stays." The article was short, just a few paragraphs about how Mercy General and 2 other hospitals had started offering safety deposit services for patients who needed secure storage for important documents and valuables during long-term treatment. The program had been discontinued in the early 2000s when liability became an issue, but for nearly 15 years, the hospital had maintained small safety deposit boxes in their administrative offices. My heart was hammering as I scrolled through the article. There, in the 3rd paragraph, asterisk the service has been particularly popular with elderly patients who want to ensure their important documents remain secure during extended hospital stays. It gives families peace of mind, says Rose Blackwood, a hospital volunteer who helped implement the program. Asterisk. Rose Blackwood. My grandmother had helped create the program. I checked the time, 11:47 p.m. Way too late to call anyone, but I was too wired to sleep. Instead, I spent the next 3 hours researching everything I could find about Mercy General's old safety deposit program. The trail was frustratingly cold, most of the records had been digitized or destroyed, and the hospital's website had no mention of the discontinued service. But I did find one more crucial piece of information. When the program ended in 2003, patients had been given 12 months to claim their belongings. After that, unclaimed items were transferred to a third-party storage facility called SecureKeep Solutions. I was at Mercy General's information desk by 8:30 a.m. the next morning, still wearing yesterday's clothes and probably looking like I'd slept in my car, which wasn't far from the truth, since I'd dozed off on the L train and missed my stop twice. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and scrubs covered in cartoon cats, listened patiently as I explained my situation. "Honey, that safety deposit program ended when I was still in nursing school," she said, shaking her head. "But let me check with our patient records department. What was your grandmother's full name?" "Rose Eleanor Blackwood." She would have been here a lot in the late 90s and early 2000s. She volunteered here, and I was. I was a patient here when I was little. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Mrs. Chan, the head of patient records, in an office that smelled like industrial disinfectant and old paper. I remember Rose, Mrs. Chan said, pulling a thin file from a metal cabinet. Sweet lady. She used to bring cookies for the night shift nurses. She flipped through the pages, her finger tracing lines of text. Here we are. Rose Blackwood maintained safety deposit box number 847 from 1999 until the program ended. According to our records, the contents were transferred to Secure Keep Solutions in January 2004. She handed me a photocopy of a form. You'll need this transfer number and proof that you're her legal heir. Secure Keep is still in business. They're over on North Michigan Avenue. I stared at the paper in my hands, barely breathing. Box number 847. After 4 months of dead ends, I finally had a real lead. The key felt warm in my pocket as I walked out of the hospital, like it knew we were getting close. Secure Keep Solutions occupied the 3rd floor of a glass office building that screamed, "We handle other people's forgotten problems." The lobby was all beige carpet and motivational posters about security and trust. I'd spent my last $40 on a notarized copy of Grandma's death certificate and an affidavit proving I was her heir, money I desperately needed for groceries, but this felt like my only shot at something. Anything. The receptionist, a guy about my age with perfectly styled hair and a name tag reading Derek, looked up from his computer with practiced customer service enthusiasm. Hi there. How can Secure Keep help you today? I slid the hospital transfer form across his desk, along with my documentation. I need to access a safety deposit box that was transferred here from Mercy General Hospital. Box number 847, registered to Rose Eleanor Blackwood. Derek's smile faltered as he typed something into his system. Okay, let me just, His fingers clicked across the keyboard faster. Can you spell the last name for me? Blackwood. More typing. A frown creased his forehead. I'm showing that box in our system, but hold on, let me get my supervisor. My stomach dropped. Is there a problem? Just 1 second. Derek disappeared into a back office, leaving me to stare at a motivational poster featuring a lighthouse and the words, "Your security is our beacon." Through the glass partition, I could see him talking animatedly with a woman in a navy blazer who kept glancing in my direction. When they returned, the woman, her name tag read Sandra Hoffman, manager, had the expression of someone about to deliver bad news. Ms. Summers, I'm Sandra. I understand you're trying to access box 847? Yes, it belonged to my grandmother. I have all the documentation. The documentation is fine, Sandra interrupted gently. The issue is that someone else accessed that box yesterday. The words hit me like cold water. What? A Patricia Blackwood Mills presented herself as Rose Blackwood's primary heir. She had a death certificate, probate documents, the works. She removed all contents yesterday afternoon around 4 p.m. I felt the room tilt sideways. Patricia? My Aunt Patricia? Sandra nodded sympathetically. I'm so sorry. According to our records, the box is now empty. If there's been some mistake with the inheritance. What did she take? My voice came out strangled. Can you tell me what was in the box? Derek consulted his computer screen. Our intake log from 2004 shows, let's see, multiple sealed envelopes, several legal documents, what looks like old photographs, and a metal cash box. The client, Ms. Blackwood Mills, signed for everything. I sank into one of their waiting room chairs, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. Patricia had beaten me here. Somehow, she'd figured out what the key was for and gotten here first. But how? I'd never told anyone about my research, never mentioned Mercy General or Secure Keep to anybody. Miss Summers? Sandra's voice seemed to come from far away. Are you all right? I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and scrolled to Patricia's Instagram. Her most recent post, uploaded 3 hours ago, showed her and Jennifer at some upscale restaurant downtown. The caption read, "Celebrating another family mystery solved. Magnifying glass tilted left sparkles thanks Grandma Rose for the final treasure hunt. Hashtag blessed, hashtag family first, hashtag inheritance." The comments were full of heart eye emojis and congratulations from her friends. Jennifer had replied, "Still can't believe Maya never figured it out. We should send her a thank you card faced with tears of joy." How did she know to look here? I whispered to myself, but Sandra overheard. She mentioned that a family member had done some research that pointed her in the right direction. She was very grateful to whoever had done the legwork. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Someone had been watching me. Following my research. Waiting for me to do all the work so they could swoop in and claim whatever Grandma Rose had left behind. But who? I hadn't told anyone about the hospital connection, about Secure Keep, about any of it. Then I remembered Jennifer's smug comment at Murphy's Diner, for college. The $20 tip. The way she'd whispered it, like she was being generous. Like she felt guilty about something. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I scrolled through Jennifer's social media. There, buried in her post from 2 weeks ago, was a photo of her and some guy I didn't recognize at a coffee shop. The caption was innocent enough, "Great first date with this PI. Thanks Tinder." 2 hearts. Pi. Private investigator. I screenshot the image and zoomed in on the guy's face. Mid-30s, brown hair, wearing a button-down that screamed, "I follow people for money." In the background of Jennifer's photo, barely visible on the table, was a manila folder with papers sticking out. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Jennifer hadn't just run into me at Murphy's Diner by coincidence. She'd been having me followed. Probably laughing with Patricia every night about poor, pathetic Maya chasing dead ends while they waited for me to solve their puzzle for them. Miss Summers? Sandra was still standing there, looking concerned. Is there anything else we can help you with? The key, I said suddenly. Patricia would have needed a key to access the box, right? Derek nodded. Yes, our old Mercy General transfers required the original key for access. She had it with her. But I was holding my key. I pulled the velvet pouch from my pocket and showed them the ornate brass key that had been haunting me for months. Sandra and Derek exchanged glances. Sandra cleared her throat. Miss Summers, can I see that for a moment? I handed over the key, watching as Sandra examined it under her desk lamp. She pulled out a magnifying glass, apparently a standard tool in the forgotten storage business, and studied the intricate scrollwork. Derek, pull up the specifications for box 847. More typing. Derek frowned at his screen. That's weird. It says here that box 847 required 2 keys for access. A primary and a secondary. Both had to be present for the box to open. What does that mean? I was gripping the edge of Sandra's desk so hard my knuckles were white. Sandra looked up from the key with an expression I couldn't read. It means your aunt couldn't have accessed the box with just one key. Our system shows box 847 was opened yesterday, but... She trailed off, typing something into her computer. Oh. Oh my. What? She opened box 846. Not 847. Sandra's face was pale now. The boxes are right next to each other, and if someone was in a hurry, wasn't paying attention to the numbers. Derek was scrolling frantically through his screen. Box 846 was registered to a Robert Blackwood. Transferred here from Mercy General the same day as Rose Blackwood's box. The contents were, looks like some old medical records and a small jewelry box containing a wedding ring. My mind was reeling. Robert Blackwood. That was my grandfather. He died in 1998. So your aunt, Sandra said slowly, emptied your grandfather's safety deposit box. Not your grandmother's. I started laughing. I couldn't help it, high, slightly hysterical laughter that made Derek back away from his desk. Patricia had been so smug, so certain she'd outsmarted me. She'd hired a private investigator, had me followed, stolen my research, and rushed down here to claim her prize. And she'd opened the wrong box. So box 847 is still. I managed to say between laughs. Completely untouched, Sandra confirmed. And you have the key. I wiped tears from my eyes, whether from laughing or crying, I wasn't sure anymore. Can I access it now? Sandra was already standing up. Derek, get the paperwork ready. Miss Summers, if you'll follow me. The storage area was in the basement, a climate-controlled maze of metal boxes in various sizes. Box 847 was small, about the size of a shoebox, with 2 keyholes side by side. Sandra inserted her master key into one lock, then gestured for me to use mine in the second. On 3, she said. 1, 2. The locks turned in perfect synchronization, and the box opened with a soft click that sounded like the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. Inside, exactly as Derek had described from the 2004 inventory, were several sealed envelopes, old photographs, and a small metal cash box that looked like it belonged in an antique store. I reached for the cash box first, my hands trembling. It was heavier than I expected, with Blackwood Family Enterprises EST 1952 engraved on a small brass plate on the lid. My grandmother had been right. The strongest foundations really were built on the deepest roots. And I was about to discover just how deep mine went. The metal cash box felt ancient in my hands, like it held decades of secrets. Sandra stepped back respectfully as I lifted the lid, the hinges creaking with age. Inside, nestled in faded red velvet, were documents that looked older than I was. The top paper was a business certificate dated March 15, 1952, establishing Blackwood Family Enterprises with my great-grandfather, Thomas Blackwood, listed as sole proprietor. But it was the paper beneath it that made my breath catch. A stock certificate. Blackwood Family Enterprises, 10,000 shares, issued to Thomas Blackwood. And beneath that, another certificate transferring those same shares to Rose Eleanor Blackwood upon Thomas's death in 1971. Holy shit, I whispered, then immediately apologized to Sandra. Sorry, this is... Sandra peered over my shoulder. What kind of business was Blackwood Family Enterprises? I lifted out more documents, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read them. Property deeds. Lease agreements. And then, at the bottom of the stack, a letter dated just 8 months ago, written in Grandma Rose's familiar handwriting. Asterisk, my dearest Maya, if you're reading this, it means you were smart enough to figure out my clues and persistent enough not to give up. I'm so proud of you. By now you probably discovered that our family owned more than anyone realized. What you don't know is that Blackwood Family Enterprises never stopped operating. We've been collecting rent on 12 commercial properties in downtown Chicago for over 70 years. The current property management company is Meridian Holdings, and they've been depositing our quarterly payments into a business account at First National Bank of Illinois. The account number is 4472-889-1156. The balance as of my last statement was $2.7 million, and it grows by approximately $180,000 every quarter. I never told the others because they never bothered to ask about our family history. They only cared about what they could see and spend immediately. You were the only one who ever listened to my stories about your great-grandfather and his business dreams. This is yours now, sweetheart. Use it wisely. All my love, Grandma Rose asterisk. The letter fluttered from my numb fingers. $2.7 million. Growing by $180,000 every 3 months. I was holding documentation for a family business that had been generating income for decades while my relatives fought over Grandma's jewelry and house. Miss Summers? Sandra's voice seemed to come from underwater. Are you all right? I picked up another document, a more recent bank statement from First National, dated just 2 weeks before Grandma died. The account balance showed $2,847,293.44. Nearly $3 million. $3 million that Patricia and Dennis and Jennifer had no idea existed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk Maya, this is Tony from Murphy's. You missed your shift this morning. Everything okay, kid? Asterisk. I stared at the message, then at the bank statement in my other hand. This morning I'd been devastated about losing a $12 an hour job slinging eggs and coffee. Now I was apparently a millionaire. I need to make some phone calls, I said to Sandra, my voice barely above a whisper. Of course. You can use our conference room for privacy. As Sandra led me upstairs, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the elevator's polished steel doors. Same messy hair, same thrift store coat with a broken zipper, same dark circles under my eyes from months of stress and ramen noodles. But something had changed in my expression. For the first time in 4 months, I looked like someone who had options. My phone buzzed again. Another Instagram notification from Patricia, probably posting more photos of her celebration lunch. She had no idea that while she was toasting her grandfather's old medical records and wedding ring, I was holding the keys to a business empire she never knew existed. Grandma Rose had been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. And now it was my turn to make a move. The conference room at Secure Keep had the kind of fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly unreal. I spread the documents across the polished table like I was laying out tarot cards that could predict my future. The bank statement kept drawing my eyes back to that impossible number, $2,847,293.44. I called First National Bank first, my fingers stumbling over the numbers on my cracked phone screen. Business accounts, this is Marcus speaking. Hi, I need to verify an account balance for Blackwood Family Enterprises. Account number 4472-889-1156. I read Grandma's letter word for word, half expecting them to tell me it was all some elaborate mistake. Can you provide the account owner's information for verification? Rose Eleanor Blackwood was the previous owner. She passed away in September. I'm Maya Summers, her legal heir. I rattled off Grandma's social security number and birthday, information I'd memorized from handling her funeral arrangements. The hold music was some generic jazz that made my anxiety spike. Through the conference room's glass walls, I could see Sandra at her desk, pretending not to watch me while clearly dying of curiosity. Miss Summers? Marcus was back. I show Rose Blackwood as the primary account holder, but there's actually a secondary heir listed on the account. A Patricia Mills? My stomach dropped. What does that mean, exactly? It means both parties would need to be present to make any major changes to the account. But according to our records, you're listed as the primary beneficiary for the business assets themselves. Mrs. Blackwood was very specific about that distinction when she updated the paperwork in February. 2 months before Grandma had updated her will. She'd been planning this for months, maybe years. Has anyone else contacted you about this account recently? I asked. I can't discuss other clients' inquiries, but I can tell you that no one has accessed this account since Mrs. Blackwood's last transaction in August. Would you like to schedule an appointment to discuss your options? I made an appointment for Monday morning, then immediately called the property management company. Meridian Holdings sounded expensive even over the phone, classical music on hold, a receptionist with a voice like silk. Meridian Holdings, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with someone about properties managed for Blackwood Family Enterprises. One moment, please. The hold was longer this time. Long enough for me to study the lease agreement spread across the table. 12 properties, all in prime downtown locations. Monthly rents ranging from $8,000 to $22,000. No wonder the quarterly deposits were so high. This is David Chen, Senior Property Manager. How can I help you? My name is Maya Summers. I'm calling about the Blackwood Family Enterprises portfolio. Rose Blackwood was my grandmother, and she recently passed away. Oh, Miss Blackwood was wonderful to work with. Please accept my condolences. Are you calling to discuss the transfer of management? Actually, I'm trying to understand exactly what properties we're talking about. I'm still sorting through her estate documents. David's laugh was warm, professional. Of course. The Blackwood portfolio is quite impressive, 12 commercial properties, all fully leased. There's a corner building on State Street that houses that popular bookstore chain, the office complex on LaSalle that's home to 3 law firms, and the restaurant space in River North where that celebrity chef just opened his new place. Your grandmother had quite an eye for real estate investment. I was scribbling notes on the back of one of Grandma's envelopes, trying to keep up. Celebrity chef restaurant. Law firms. A bookstore chain I definitely recognized. I bought textbooks there just last semester. The December quarterly payment should be processing within the next few days, David continued. I believe it's approximately $184,000 this quarter. $184,000. In 3 days, I'd have more money than my relatives had inherited combined, just from one quarterly payment. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Asterisk, hope you're having a better day than yesterday. Patricia felt so bad seeing you at that diner. We're thinking about you. Red heart asterisk. I stared at the message, then at the property documents scattered across the table. They had no idea what was coming. I spent the rest of Friday afternoon in a coffee shop near Secure Keep, my laptop balanced on a wobbly table while I researched everything I could about Blackwood Family Enterprises. The documents from the safety deposit box were spread around me like sacred texts, each one revealing another layer of Grandma's secret empire. The State Street property alone, the one housing the bookstore chain, was worth an estimated $3.2 million according to recent comparable sales. The restaurant space in River North where that celebrity chef had opened? I found the lease agreement buried in the stack, $22,000 monthly rent, locked in for 10 years, with annual increases tied to inflation. My great-grandfather hadn't just been a businessman. He'd been a visionary who'd bought up prime Chicago real estate in the 1950s when it was still affordable, then held onto it while the city grew around his investments. And Grandma Rose had quietly maintained his empire for 50 years while working as a hospital volunteer and raising me, never once mentioning that she was collecting rent from some of the most valuable commercial properties in downtown Chicago. But as I dug deeper into the property records, I found something that made my blood run cold. Patricia was listed as co-beneficiary on 3 of the properties. Not the business account, that was mine according to the bank. But 3 specific properties had been updated in 2018 to include Patricia Mills as a secondary heir. The State Street building, the LaSalle office complex, and one of the smaller retail spaces near Millennium Park. I called David Chen back immediately. Mr. Chen, it's Maya Summers again. I have a question about the beneficiary information on some of the properties. Of course. What can I help you with? I'm seeing Patricia Mills listed on 3 properties, but not the others. Can you explain how that works? There was a pause, the sound of typing. Mrs. Blackwood updated those specific properties in 2018. According to our notes, she wanted to ensure that if anything happened to her, the management of those 3 properties would require both beneficiaries to be in agreement. It was part of her estate planning strategy. My hands were shaking as I wrote down the property addresses. Those 3 properties generated approximately $67,000 per quarter. Not the majority of the income, but still substantial. And Patricia would have legal claim to them. Has anyone else contacted you about this recently? I asked. Actually, yes. A Patricia Mills called this morning asking about scheduling a property inspection. She mentioned she'd recently discovered her inheritance and wanted to see the buildings in person. This morning. Right after she'd emptied Grandpa's safety deposit box thinking it was Grandma's. Which meant Patricia was already putting pieces together, even though she'd grabbed the wrong documents. She knew enough to start making calls, asking questions. It was only a matter of time before she discovered the full extent of what Grandma had hidden. I hung up and immediately started calculating. If Patricia got legal control of those 3 properties, she'd have leverage. She could force a partition sale, demand her share of the business be bought out, or worse, she could try to claim that Grandma's decision to exclude her from the other properties wasn't legally valid. My phone rang, making me jump so hard I knocked over my coffee. The caller ID showed Dennis's number. Maya, sweetheart. His voice was artificially cheerful, the way people sound when they want something. How are you doing? Patricia mentioned she ran into you at work yesterday. I gripped the phone tighter. Dennis never called me. Ever. I'm fine, Uncle Dennis. What's up? Well, you know how family is, we've all been thinking about you. Struggling with money, dropping out of school. It breaks our hearts. The fake concern in his voice made my skin crawl. Patricia and I were talking, and we realized we might have been too hasty about Grandma's estate. Maybe there are some things we overlooked. Some family documents or property records that might benefit all of us. There it was. They'd found something in Grandpa's box that pointed them toward the bigger picture. And now they were fishing to see what I knew. Actually, Dennis, I'm doing much better now, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. In fact, I just came into some unexpected opportunities. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Oh? Dennis's voice had lost its fake warmth. What kind of opportunities? I looked down at the property deed spread across my coffee-stained table. 3 months ago, I would have told him everything. I would have been so grateful for any family member to show interest in my life that I'd have spilled every detail about my discovery. But I'd learned something important in the past 4 months. My relatives only cared about me when they thought I might have something they wanted. Just some things Grandma left me that turned out to be more valuable than anyone realized, I said casually. You know how she was always full of surprises. More silence. Then, Maya, honey, I hope you're not getting your hopes up about that old key. Patricia and I have been doing some research into Grandma's affairs, and we found some documents that suggest there might be some family assets that need to be properly distributed among all the heirs. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice light. What kind of documents? Legal papers. Property records. The kind of thing that probably requires lawyers to sort out properly. Dennis's tone was shifting from fake concerned uncle to something harder. Look, why don't you come over to Patricia's house tomorrow? We should all sit down and discuss this as a family. Tomorrow's Saturday, Dennis. I have to work. The lie came easily. And honestly, after the way everyone treated me when Grandma died, I'm not really interested in family meetings. Maya. His voice was sharp now, dropping all pretense of caring. Don't be stupid about this. If there are family business assets that weren't properly disclosed in the will, that's fraud. Grandma was old, confused. She might not have understood what she was doing. The audacity was breathtaking. 4 months ago, these same people had laughed at my worthless inheritance. Now that they suspected there was more money involved, suddenly Grandma was confused and needed their protection. Grandma Rose was the sharpest person I ever knew, I said, my voice getting louder. The other coffee shop customers were starting to stare, but I didn't care. She knew exactly what she was doing. She left each of us what she thought we deserved. Listen to me very carefully, Dennis said, and there was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. Patricia has already contacted a lawyer about this. If you're hiding assets that belong to the family, if you're trying to cheat us out of our rightful inheritance, we will take you to court. We will drag this out until you're buried in legal fees you can't afford. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Dennis was right about one thing, I couldn't afford a legal battle. Even with the money from the business account, Patricia and Dennis had resources, connections, expensive lawyers on speed dial. They could tie me up in court for years. But as I looked down at Grandma's letter, one phrase jumped out at me, asterisk, use it wisely. Asterisk. You know what, Dennis? I said, gathering up the documents and sliding them back into my bag. You're absolutely right. We should handle this properly. Legally. With full disclosure. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable. I'll have my lawyer contact Patricia's lawyer on Monday morning. We'll schedule a proper meeting, with all the documentation, all the property records, all the bank statements. Everything out in the open. Another long pause. Your lawyer? Oh, didn't I mention? I retained legal counsel this afternoon. Amazing what good lawyers cost these days, but fortunately I can afford it now. I was walking out of the coffee shop, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Tell Patricia I said congratulations on her treasure hunt yesterday, by the way. I hope Grandpa's medical records were everything she hoped they'd be. I hung up before Dennis could respond and immediately called information. Chicago Directory, how can I help you? I need the number for the most expensive law firm in the city. I walked into the offices of Hartwell, Steinberg and Associates at 9 a.m. sharp on Monday morning, wearing my one decent interview outfit from college, a black blazer I bought at Goodwill and pants that were slightly too short but would have to do. The reception area screamed money, marble floors, original artwork, and leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Maya Summers to see Jonathan Hartwell, I told the receptionist, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every kind of legal crisis Chicago could produce. Mr. Hartwell is expecting you. Conference room 3. Jonathan Hartwell was exactly what I'd expected from Chicago's most expensive estate attorney, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of competence that came from winning cases for 40 years. He stood as I entered, extending a manicured hand. Miss Summers. I understand you have an interesting inheritance situation. I'd called his office Friday evening, expecting to leave a voicemail. Instead, I'd gotten Hartwell himself, working late on a Saturday. When I'd mentioned the dollar amounts involved, he'd cleared his Monday morning schedule. Interesting is one way to put it, I said, sliding the safety deposit box documents across the polished conference table. My relatives think they've outsmarted me. I'm hoping you can help me prove them wrong. Hartwell spent 20 minutes reviewing every document in silence, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. His expression never changed, but I caught him double-checking the bank statement 3 times. This is quite remarkable, he finally said. Your grandmother was extraordinarily thorough. These property deeds are ironclad, the business documentation is pristine, and the bank account designation is crystal clear. He looked up at me over his reading glasses. You're the sole owner of a very valuable enterprise, Miss Summers. But Patricia is listed on 3 properties. As a co-beneficiary, not co-owner. There's a significant difference. She has the right to be consulted on major decisions regarding those specific properties, but she doesn't own them. Hartwell leaned back in his chair. Your uncle's threat of legal action is largely empty. Your grandmother's will is valid, these documents predate the will by decades, and everything appears to have been properly transferred. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. However, Hartwell continued, and my stomach dropped, there is one complication. The 3 properties where Patricia has co-beneficiary status generate substantial income. If she wanted to be vindictive, she could force expensive legal proceedings around every decision, lease renewals, property improvements, tenant issues. She can't take the properties from you, but she could make managing them extremely difficult. So what are my options? Hartwell's smile was sharp. Well, you could offer to buy out her interest in those 3 properties. Given the current market value and income generation, I'd estimate her stake at approximately $400,000. $400,000. 3 months ago, that would have sounded impossible. Now it was less than 2 quarterly payments from the business account. Or, Hartwell continued, we could let them make the first move. Your uncle mentioned Patricia has already contacted a lawyer. Let's see what they think they've discovered before we show our full hand. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, * family meeting tonight 7 p.m. my house. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Maya. We have lawyers too. *. I showed the message to Hartwell, who chuckled. Perfect. They're getting impatient. Impatient people make mistakes. He stood up, straightening his tie. Miss Summers, I think it's time we gave your family the full disclosure they've been demanding. All of it. Every document, every bank statement, every property deed. You want me to tell them everything? Oh no, Hartwell's smile was genuinely predatory now. I want you to let me tell them everything. Tonight. 7 p.m. This was about to get very interesting. Patricia's house had always intimidated me, a sprawling suburban monument to nouveau riche taste, complete with marble foyer and a chandelier that belonged in a hotel lobby. Tonight, walking up the circular driveway with Jonathan Hartwell beside me, carrying his leather briefcase full of documents, I felt different. Still nervous, but no longer small. Remember, Hartwell murmured as we approached the front door, let me do the talking. Your job is to look surprised by whatever they think they've discovered. Patricia answered the door in full battle armor, designer suit, fresh manicure, the kind of makeup that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. Maya, sweetheart. And you brought a friend? Jonathan Hartwell, estate attorney, he said smoothly, extending his business card. MS. Summers retained my services to ensure full transparency in the family estate matters. Patricia's smile flickered as she read the card. Hartwell, Steinberg and Associates was the kind of law firm that made people nervous just by existing. Of course. We're all about transparency here. Patricia led us through the house to her dining room, where Dennis and Jennifer were already seated around her massive mahogany table. Can I get anyone coffee? Water? This won't take long, Dennis said curtly. He had papers spread in front of him, photocopies of what looked like property records and legal documents. Maya, we discovered some irregularities in Grandma's estate. Documents that weren't disclosed during the will reading. Jennifer was practically vibrating with excitement. We found papers in Grandpa's old files that show the family-owned property downtown. Like, actual valuable property that somehow never got mentioned. I arranged my face into what I hoped looked like confusion. What kind of property? Patricia slid a photocopy across the table. Commercial buildings, Maya. Income-producing real estate worth potentially millions of dollars. And according to these documents, it should have been divided equally among all of Rose's heirs. The photocopy was a 1971 property transfer deed, one I recognized from my safety deposit box discovery. But this copy was partial, missing the crucial pages that showed Grandma Rose as the sole inheritor. Where did you find this? I asked. In the box from Secure Keep, Dennis said triumphantly. Along with other evidence that Grandma was hiding assets from the family. We've already had our attorney review everything. Hartwell leaned forward slightly. And what exactly did your attorney conclude? Patricia's lawyer, a thin, nervous-looking man I hadn't noticed sitting in the corner, cleared his throat. Based on the available documentation, it appears Rose Blackwood may have improperly claimed sole ownership of family business assets. The original documents show Thomas Blackwood established a family enterprise intended to benefit all his descendants. Interesting theory, Hartwell said mildly. May I see your documentation? For the next 10 minutes, I watched Patricia's lawyer present their case with growing confidence. They had partial property records, incomplete business filings, and a lot of assumptions about what the missing pieces might say. They'd built an entire legal theory around the idea that Grandma had cheated them out of millions. So you see, Patricia concluded, we're prepared to file suit to recover what rightfully belongs to the family. Unless, of course, Maya wants to do the right thing and agree to proper distribution of the assets. Dennis nodded aggressively. We're talking about millions of dollars, Maya. Money that could solve all your problems and give everyone their fair share. Jennifer actually looked a little guilty. We don't want to hurt you, Maya. But fair is fair. The room fell silent. Patricia was smiling like she'd just won the lottery. Dennis looked smug. Even their lawyer seemed confident. Hartwell opened his briefcase. Well, he said conversationally, this is fascinating. Miss Summers, I think your family deserves to see the complete documentation. All of it. He began laying papers on the table with theatrical precision. Complete property deeds. Full business incorporation documents. Bank statements showing quarterly deposits going back 20 years. And Grandma's letter, explaining exactly why she'd hidden everything. Patricia's smile died first. Then Dennis's face went pale as he saw the bank balance. Jennifer just stared at the quarterly income statements like they were written in a foreign language. $2.8 million, Hartwell said pleasantly. Plus approximately $184,000 in quarterly income. All legally and properly transferred to Maya Summers as sole heir to Blackwood Family Enterprises. The silence stretched until Patricia found her voice. That's impossible. That's impossible, Patricia whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. She was staring at the bank statements like they might burst into flames. I assure you, it's quite real, Hartwell replied smoothly. Your grandmother was remarkably sophisticated in her estate planning. She spent decades building this portfolio while working as a hospital volunteer. Quite impressive, actually. Dennis grabbed one of the property deeds, his hands shaking. This can't be legal. She was hiding assets during probate. That's fraud. Actually, these assets were never part of the probate estate, Hartwell explained patiently. Blackwood Family Enterprises is a separate business entity, established in 1952 and properly transferred to Rose Blackwood in 1971 upon her father-in-law's death. The business was never Rose's personal property to distribute in her will, it was already Maya's inheritance through the direct family line. I watched my relatives' faces cycle through disbelief, anger, and what looked like genuine panic. Patricia kept flipping through the bank statements, her manicured nails clicking against the paper. Wait, Jennifer said suddenly. Maya, you knew about this when we saw you at the diner. You were working for $12 an hour while sitting on millions? The accusation in her voice made something snap inside me. I was working for $12 an hour because you people threw me away like garbage the second Grandma died. I spent 4 months eating ramen and sleeping in a coat because my loving family decided I wasn't worth helping. But if you had all this money, Dennis started. I didn't know. The words came out louder than I intended. I spent months trying to figure out what that key opened while you three posted Instagram photos of your shopping sprees and European vacations. Patricia literally hired someone to follow me, steal my research, and beat me to the safety deposit box. Patricia's face flushed red. That was a misunderstanding. You opened the wrong box, I continued, standing up now. You were so eager to screw me over that you didn't even check the number properly. You stole Grandpa's medical records while my inheritance sat 3 inches away. Their lawyer was frantically taking notes, probably calculating how much money his firm was about to not make. Dennis kept staring at the quarterly income statements like he could will them to change. This still doesn't seem right, Patricia said, her voice taking on the wheedling tone I remembered from childhood arguments. Grandma always said we were all family. She wouldn't have wanted Maya to have everything while the rest of us struggle. The sheer audacity made me laugh. Struggle? Patricia, you spent $15,000 remodeling Grandma's kitchen last month. Dennis bought a boat and named it Rose's Revenge, like her death was some kind of joke. Jennifer sold half the family jewelry to fund a trip to Paris. That's different, Jennifer started. How is it different? I demanded. You inherited hundreds of thousands of dollars and spent it on toys and trips while I was choosing between rent and food. Now you find out I have money and suddenly family loyalty matters? Hartwell cleared his throat gently. Perhaps we should address the elephant in the room. Ms. Mills, you do have co-beneficiary status on 3 of the properties, the State Street building, the LaSalle complex, and the Millennium Park retail space. Patricia's eyes lit up with renewed hope. What does that mean exactly? It means you have the right to be consulted on major decisions regarding those properties. Lease renewals, significant repairs, tenant changes. You can't sell them or collect rent directly, but you do have some legal standing. Dennis leaned forward eagerly. So Maya can't just cut us out completely. Not from those 3 properties, no. Hartwell's expression remained neutral. Of course, Maya could choose to buy out your interest. Current market value would put Patricia's stake at approximately $400,000. I watched Patricia do the math in her head, her eyes flickering between greed and uncertainty. $400,000 was more than she'd inherited from Grandma's original estate, but it was a fraction of what the properties would generate over time. Or, I said quietly, we could discuss a different arrangement. Everyone turned to stare at me. Even Hartwell looked curious. I'll make you a one-time offer. All of you. I pulled out my phone and opened my calculator app. $50,000 each. Cash. Paid within 30 days. In exchange, you sign away any claim to any Blackwood family business assets, past, present, or future. The room exploded into protests, but I held up my hand. That's more than generous considering you've spent the last 4 months treating me like I was invisible. You get $50,000 for doing absolutely nothing except signing papers. Patricia's face was bright red now. $50,000? Maya, those properties are worth millions. Those properties belong to me, I said firmly. I'm offering you $50,000 out of kindness. The same kindness you showed me when I was sleeping in a winter coat and eating dollar store pasta. Dennis stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against Patricia's hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. We're family, Maya. You can't just. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Where was family when I called you crying about dropping out of school? Where was family when I was working dawn shifts at a greasy diner just to survive? The silence that followed was deafening. Through Patricia's picture window, I could see her neighbors' perfect suburban lawns, their BMWs in circular driveways, their lives untouched by the kind of desperation I'd been living with for months. You have 48 hours to decide, I said finally. After that, the offer expires and you get nothing except whatever legal rights you can afford to fight for. I stood up, and Hartwell smoothly gathered his papers back into his briefcase. Miss Summers will be in touch, he said politely to the shell-shocked room. As we walked back to his car, Hartwell chuckled softly. 50,000 each? That's quite generous. Maybe, I said. But it's also smart. Paying them off now means I never have to see them again. Some inheritances, I was learning, were worth more than money. They were worth freedom. The 48 hours crawled by like the longest weekend of my life. I'd moved back into my studio apartment, but now it felt different, temporary, like a hotel room I was staying in while deciding where to actually live. The space heater that had been my nemesis all winter suddenly seemed quaint rather than desperate. Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went grocery shopping without checking prices. Real groceries. Fresh vegetables that weren't wilted. Meat that wasn't marked down for quick sale. Coffee that didn't taste like it had been filtered through cardboard. The total came to $247.83, and I didn't even flinch when I handed over my debit card. The bank appointment Monday had been surreal. Marcus, the business accounts manager, had treated me like visiting royalty once he verified my identity and processed the paperwork. The account was now fully under my control, with online access and a black credit card that felt heavy in my wallet. The December quarterly payment will process tomorrow, he told me, sliding documents across his mahogany desk. $184,312. Then March 15th will be your next distribution. $184,000. Every 3 months. Forever. But Sunday evening brought the first complication I hadn't anticipated. Maya? The voice on my apartment intercom was unfamiliar, crackling through the ancient speaker system. This is Detective Sarah Chen with Chicago PD. I need to speak with you about a fraud complaint. My stomach dropped as I buzzed her up. Detective Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes and a rumpled coat that suggested she'd been working long hours. She showed her badge as I opened the door. Miss Summers, I apologize for the late hour. I understand there's been a family dispute over some inheritance issues? I led her to my tiny kitchen table, the only seating area in the studio besides my mattress. What kind of complaint? Detective Chen pulled out a small notepad. Your uncle Dennis Mills filed a report yesterday claiming you've been hiding assets that legally belong to multiple family members. He's alleging inheritance fraud and elder abuse. The words hit me like ice water. Elder abuse? He claims you manipulated your grandmother into changing legal documents to exclude other family members from valuable assets. Says you isolated her from the family and coerced her into hiding millions of dollars from legitimate heirs. I stared at her, speechless. Dennis had gone nuclear. Not content with a $50,000 offer, he was trying to have me arrested. Miss Summers? Do you have documentation showing how you came to control these business assets? With shaking hands, I pulled out the folder Hartwell had prepared for me, copies of everything from the safety deposit box, the bank records, the property deeds going back to 1952. Detective Chen reviewed them methodically, occasionally asking questions about dates and signatures. Your grandmother updated the safety deposit box access in 2019, she noted. Did she seem confused or coerced at that time? She was sharper than I am, I said honestly. She was volunteering at the hospital until 6 months before she died. She balanced her own checkbook, managed her medications, drove herself to appointments. The nurses at Mercy General would tell you she was mentoring new volunteers right up to the end. Detective Chen made more notes. And your family is claiming they knew nothing about these business assets? They never asked. In 30 years of family dinners, not once did anyone ask Grandma about her father-in-law's business or what happened to the properties after he died. They only cared when they thought there was money involved. The detective closed her notepad and handed me a business card. Miss Summers, based on the documentation you've shown me, this appears to be a civil matter, not criminal fraud. The business transfers were legal and properly documented. However, I'd recommend you have your attorney contact the prosecutor's office directly. After she left, I sat staring at my phone for 20 minutes before calling Hartwell. They're trying to have me arrested, I said when he answered. I expected this, he replied calmly. Dennis Mills called my office this afternoon, threatening criminal charges if you don't agree to voluntary restitution of the family assets. What does that mean? It means they want you to give them the money willingly so they don't have to prove they deserve it legally. Hartwell paused. Maya, I think it's time we withdrew that $50,000 offer. I closed my eyes, feeling the last threads of family connection snap. Do it. Some bridges, I realized, were meant to be burned. The call came Tuesday morning while I was having my first leisurely breakfast in months, actual eggs instead of ramen, coffee that didn't taste like punishment. Maya, it's Jonathan. We need to meet immediately. Your family just made a very expensive mistake. An hour later, I was back in his marble and mahogany office, watching him spread new documents across the conference table with barely contained glee. Your Uncle Dennis filed an emergency injunction yesterday, trying to freeze all Blackwood Family Enterprises assets pending a full investigation into what he's calling systematic inheritance fraud, Hartwell explained. He claimed you forged documents and manipulated bank records. My stomach lurched. Can he do that? He can try. In fact, he paid his attorney $8,000 to file the paperwork. Hartwell's smile was razor sharp. Unfortunately for Dennis, emergency injunctions require evidence. Real evidence. Not partial photocopies and wishful thinking. He slid a court document across the table. Judge Morrison reviewed their filing this morning. She was unimpressed. Quote, this appears to be a family dispute over disappointment with inheritance distribution rather than any evidence of fraud or malfeasance. So what does that mean? It means Dennis's lawyer just filed frivolous legal documents that wasted the court's time. Judge Morrison ordered them to pay your legal fees, $12,000 and counting, plus court costs. Hartwell leaned back in his leather chair. But the real gift came this afternoon. He pulled out another document, this one bearing the letterhead of Patricia's attorney. Your Aunt Patricia, apparently panicked by Dennis's nuclear approach, decided to distance herself from the criminal fraud allegations. She just signed a complete release of any claim to Blackwood Family Enterprises assets in exchange for nothing. I stared at the signature on the release form. She gave up her co-beneficiary status? Everything. She was so afraid of being associated with Dennis's fraud accusations that she signed away her rights to all 3 properties. Hartwell's chuckle was genuinely delighted. Your aunt just surrendered a $400,000 asset to avoid legal liability for your uncle's stupidity. The irony was perfect. Patricia, who'd hired a private investigator to spy on me, who'd rushed to steal what she thought was my inheritance, had been so terrified of criminal charges that she'd signed away the one legitimate claim she'd actually had. What about Jennifer? Called my office an hour ago. Very apologetic, very eager to sign whatever documents would make this all go away. She'll execute a release by Friday. I looked out Hartwell's window at downtown Chicago, at the skyline built on foundations laid by dreamers and visionaries like my great-grandfather. Somewhere in those glass towers were the properties that had been quietly generating wealth for my family for 70 years while everyone fought over jewelry and furniture. So it's over? It's over, Hartwell confirmed. You now own all 12 properties outright, no co-beneficiaries, no legal challenges. The business account is entirely yours, the quarterly payments are yours, and thanks to your family's legal incompetence, you'll never have to deal with their claims again. My phone buzzed with a text from Dennis, *Maya, there's been a misunderstanding. We should talk. I deleted it without responding. That afternoon, I drove to Rose Hill Cemetery and sat beside Grandma's headstone, the ornate key warm in my palm. The December wind cut through my coat, but I didn't mind. Next to her grave marker, someone had left fresh daisies, probably Mrs. Rodriguez from the hospital volunteer program. You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you? I said to the polished granite. The key wasn't just about the money. It was about showing me who my real family was. The strongest foundations really were built on the deepest roots. And sometimes, the most valuable inheritance wasn't money at all, it was learning who deserved your loyalty. My phone rang, Northwestern University's financial aid office. Miss Summers? We'd like to discuss your spring enrollment. I smiled, fingering the key that had unlocked everything. I'll be right there.